All right, Jake, how you doing?
Yo, man. Good. How you?
Great. Now we're going to be talking about the god of independent comic book creators, Richard Corben.
Yeah.
We both chose books on our third episode. Um, I
God
have
rest his soul.
I have Grim Wit, which has a masterpiece inside of it, and you got a haul with you, right? Do you want to go first?
I have a.
Oh boy, look, you got.
Wanna? Yeah. Maybe I'll go first. I'll span the globe here.
All right.
We spoke about Richard Corbin in Turbo Pit Fighter because our regular podcast, the making of, because he had just passed, and we were just like always enamored with his kind of like airbrush quality and
Yeah.
his like photoreal his process. It was always a mystery. um
Yes.
he's a guy that has skirted between the undergrounds and the heavy metal scene, which is like adult fantasy, full color sci-fi stuff. And he's also been, like kind of in the indie comics scene. And so I have some stuff here. Now he's not a guy that does too much dirty stuff, like explicit, but he does some mature, and sometimes he has some like nudity, but he doesn't have these crazy kind of like adult only
Yeah, no, he's not
scenes. and
explicit. He doesn't do anything explicit. He'll definitely
and
do
here this
nudes.
but he does have this incredible like colored lighting quality and this airbrush quality. When he looks at things up close, and you just don't know how he does it.
Yeah,
We still haven't figured it out. Now here, this backup story, it's like a rare example of him doing pen and ink, which you
yeah,
don't hardly see,
yeah.
right? And he's not doing his patented airbrush secret thing. This is some cool post-apocalyptic stuff here, and he does a lot of that. He develops some of these stories further on, but this kind of reminds you a little bit more of traditional undergrounds here. Um, but he also uses an incredible palette. Like here's like a whole page of warm colors. Here's a whole page of cool colors. And then he's also just a master of colored lighting. Color lighting,
Yes,
like one side left, one side right.
yes.
Um, Probably his best known character is Din, this bald headed muscle guy, and who appeared in the heavy metal movie. Correct.
Magazine and movie,
So
yes. John
right. So here's
Candy
Din
played.
number
John Candy did the voice
of
of Dead.
Den.
Yes.
You kidding me?
No, it's so awesome. It's so awesome.
That's Din's voice, John Candy.
Yes. Well, he's this
So yeah,
geeky, nerdy kid or young guy who ends up getting teleported to was it Never World, uh, and uh,
uh huh.
but the entire time he's talking over, he's talking about what he's seeing and he's experiencing. It's John Candy. It's great.
Right. So yeah. So and Den is I guess that was his main his main hit, so to speak. Um, Den was serialized in heavy metal, but this is his sequential storytelling, and it's great stuff. One thing about Corbin is he had very, I would say his sound effects were kind of crude for an artist of such ability. I mean, this seems like it's really photo referenced, but I don't know. With him,
He did a
I
lot
mean,
of he
sh-
did a lot of sculpting maquettes. So there's a really cool little. If you just do a YouTube search on Richard Corbin, you'll come across a
mhm.
lot of like little video vignette types of things. And there was a French organization that gave him an honors right before he passed, and he couldn't go.
Right.
But there was some showing off of his studio, and there was like a whole shelf of these little maquettes, and he was very conscious about sculpting a head or even the torso, and then putting it in light, and then finding that uh,
Mhm.
volume and value in it. and then translating it to comics. I mean, it's amazing.
So yeah, he did some of his best work in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
Um, and you just saw in that last this last bit there was a Bruce Jones backup
Yep.
here.
Yep.
Um, and so here's also Bruce Jones. So they collaborated, and this
Yep.
was another series came out with Fantagor, which is his company, I believe, right?
Yep.
Um, and now we're in black and white, and so this is interesting because he still has all the great kind of like airbrushing effect and all of this like really realistic lighting effects, on these bodies, but it's black and white, so you don't have the color, and you don't have as much of a nuance when everything goes to this halftone dot. Sometimes it comes out a little dark and things muddle together, but it's still really lush pages, and
Yeah, because
this
it's printed on
beautiful
newsprint.
yeah, and the newsprint is pretty nice and yellow at this stage, and
Yeah, it's sweet.
this came out in 1986, not 76. Some of his stuff is 70s, from the 70s, and just a taste. This is just great stuff, and he does great blow by blow storytelling too,
Yeah.
with these like sequences and not too much in the way of dialogue. He also used this typeface, this typed out font, this computerized font. Um, Not all the time, but he did it here by '86. And then here you can pick up some of his portfolio prints, art prints, and it was probably a good idea to do this at the time. The $12, $18 in the '86. If you would have picked these things up, they would probably be selling for 5, 10 times that today.
Right.
Especially if they're signed. Look, signed and numbered, signed and numbered, signed and numbered. $12, $15. So FOMO, a little FOMO going on here. Um, just cutting through this because I know my time is short. So Son of Mutant World is another black and white. That he comes out with, and this one looks a little brighter, right? You don't have those heavy gray tones.
Yeah.
A little bit easier to see. You wonder if these were created in full color originally, and they just printed them in black and white as a decision. I also notice, I mean, this is very, I don't know if you can see it really well, but this is clearly dot matrix printer
Yeah.
that he's using, and he's printing this out on a dot matrix image writer probably, and then cutting out and pasting it up for the comics, and that's what we used to do back in the day. I don't have a year on this, but it's just
That's late
great
80s, I
storytelling.
think.
And
That's definitely late 80s too.
yeah, Son of Mutant World, and this is with Jan Schnad. Here's the backup, Bruce Jones again, and looks like some real Cadillacs and dinosaur type stuff. But
Yeah.
they were contemporaries, and they worked in the same company here, the same books. And then we get back. Oh, 1990 it says.
Oh,
So
wow,
now we're
right
getting
there.
back to Yeah, we're getting back to Corben, and he's experimenting with a lot of computer
Yeah.
typefaces and fonts. 1990, it's just like these Macs, and what can you do? Well, you can print out screen tones, you can print out these kind of like textures, and then just use them as backgrounds. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. This is not Corben, so we'll just skip to the next one. Son of Mutant World again. This one's in color. So this was issue number 1. This was issue 5. So between 1 and 5, they get to black and white. Maybe it was a budget thing. But here you're seeing these these lush airbrush looking effects. Very weird characters. He has a lot of these bears as these kind of like monsters, as these antagonists. And sometimes he goes with this cartoony
I
style.
just think that's
You
like
know,
one of his signatures is he can move in between those two kind of forms, because cartoons, they're just so bulbous and quick and identifiable, and you move along, but things that are more rendered keep you there. But he
hmm
has this way to just very easily like move through it. I just always imagined him being this mad scientist out in the Midwest and in a studio, just playing, inventing. He was in printing too, and the rumor is that he had a lot of time spent on working on the color plates, and so he was airbrushing on the color plates and putting the ruby lith and switching things up, and
Mm-hmm.
then even doing things to the color when it was going in order to create these things that nobody else has ever really replicated him. There was a guy I found on Patreon. If I can find him again, I'll put a link in there. He really aped, if you will, the feeling and style of Corben, but there's just an otherworldly dimension about his work and his storytelling, the visuals, and just it's amazing how they that the mainstream never picked up on him until towards the end. And he did a Hulk story. I think he did a Conan story. He did a yeah, and some other stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, nobody went after his style. Nobody wanted to be like Corbin until like I
No,
don't know, maybe like 2008 or something or
no,
now. But
he was an original.
phew,
He was
to
definitely a
the end,
unicorn, definitely
to the
original.
yeah,
Um, I mean, one comparison that you might say, the way that this looks like it's like painted maybe is what are the wacky packs. Under Art Spiegelman's art direction, those wacky packs kind of had a similar style where they did use this kind of pulp, modeling, pulp, the covers of the pulps, had it. They
well,
were
he had a
very
great run with
dramatic
Warren
lighting and
Magazine.
shit.
Warren Magazine, I think he got a
Corbin.
lot out of working for them and doing covers and interiors, and he even got some color
Uh huh.
insertions to the black and white mags. So yeah, I don't. It's a mystery. A lot of people have flipped through his work on YouTube channels, including like Cartoons Kayfabe, and they're dumbfounded just as well as anybody else about really what's going on. And I think the amount of detail that he goes into is in the process, not maybe so much into the page. And I think it really kind of tripped people up. This is not a comic book. This
Yeah.
is
So
not
this.
John Romita, you know,
Yeah. Right.
Jack
No, he was
Kirby.
definitely an indie guy. He was definitely indie before indie was cool. And this one is Twisted Tales. These are PC Pacific Comics, 1982. And it's funny. This one, there's only 3 pages here, of course. This one, and this one. That's the whole story and the
Yeah,
cover,
yeah.
and then everything else is a backup. But this one, this is kind of like his pen and ink style, right? Which he goes in between thin and thick, and then he does some of this kind of colored airbrushing stuff in on the inside. But
Yeah.
he did get a very weighted down with this computerized font. I think if it was hand lettered, it might be a
Yeah.
lot more
But he didn't have the
condensed.
time.
Uh,
He didn't have the time.
no, I mean he was typing it out and pasting it up, and then he had to work his layouts into the remaining space, which is a shame. This could have been smaller or more more crammed in. Um, this is funny. In the backup, you get Bruce Jones' story and Alfredo Alcala art. We were just doing him
Yeah.
last week.
Oh yeah.
Um, the great Filipino artist, and this isn't like such a fantastic fantasy story here, but it does get some horror intrigue towards the end,
Right.
and then the last backup is by this Brett Blevins guy, who's good, but you don't see his name too much. I'm
Well,
just seeing
I
if there's any more
I
Corbin.
have to say, and I've said it before on our regular episodes of Making Turbo Pit Fighter, that you really not only brought um, Corbin to me in attention to like as a storyteller, but as a craftsman. And
Yeah,
I will always thank you and think of you when I go through um, my my Corbin books. Because sometimes it would be you'd find something, and you'd be like, oh, I already have this, so I bought this one for you, and I'd be like, oh man, thanks. So, but yeah,
yeah.
I've
I mean,
got Grim.
the thing about Corbin is this. I mean, you have it on your example too. there's just you don't get this. This is airbrush. This
Yeah.
this real
He
kind of
has it's
graduated
in it's
tone and the realism.
yeah. It's otherworldly. It really is. I mean, I've got Grim Wit 1, which holds not only one of my favorite comic book stories, inking wise, but just stories too. And that is The Beast of Wolverton.
Right. And I noticed that
Wolfton. No, I'm sorry.
Wolfton. Yeah, I noticed that it's black and white right off the bat, but it's also not gradated. So is the whole thing like that?
He uses gray screens, the
Okay.
Zipatone stuff. So,
Yeah.
and then he's scratching it back out to get like a white on there. But the outlining, I guess, or the cartooning feel um, that he applies, this sort of nuancing in gradation, around here, it's almost like he's like really looking at what's going on in Europe, and he's sort of kind of condensing things to it. Morbius is going to be one of them, but he's still leaning back in. It's a very a cartoon to realistic book, and the story though, it's a pulp horror story about a girl that has to marry a prince and or a duke or a baron or something. I can't remember at this time, and the whole having a
At a
wedding
one
night.
shot?
And yes, it's a one. Well, it has backup stories or follow-up stories, because it just has and by the way, there's a spoils alert here going in. It has a really uh, you know off-putting ending, but then it leads off into
Okay.
other, and we'll let the story kind of do the unveiling. But it's the way he
I like that.
uses what's that spread.
I said I like that. Yeah, no, I like that way he's using his pen and ink there in a little bit of a different way, and some parts of the page are very open, and some parts of the page are really dark, and so right from the beginning,
Yeah,
he's using a lot of that kind of
the
craft and
balance is
that
perfect.
yeah.
And then the other thing too is that he's hand lettering it. So
Well,
it's a
somebody's hand
total
lettering it.
package. This is a
Yeah,
total package when it comes down to a Corbin piece. Um, and I definitely
I've never seen
hold
that one.
on to this one. Really? Wow.
Hmm.
This is a really good. And I think this has only been reprinted somewhere else once before. And I think it was colored. It might have been in another like anthology or something like that. But this is its original creation and its original uh, you know being made, and then the color plates would have been done that
Right.
way.
So he put it
But
out black and white, and then he did
yeah,
another thing later.
and then yeah, then
Right.
the color. But it's just
And
it's
I
really
wonder if he was I wonder if Corbin was a Russ Meyer fan because a lot of his women are very buxom.
yeah. I mean, I've
I
heard
think
that
they're
he kind of
all buxom.
yeah, and I think that once again it goes back to our thread of conversation that we're having in making Turbo, is that this exploitation, this exploitation of the 70s was a very big and underground movement that was shifting and taking hold. And I wonder if he was just knowing that he's not in the mainstream, just kept leaning more over that way. So, if walked into a store and you're like, hey man, what do you got behind the counter? And they pull out a bunch of stuff and one of them's a crazy comic book like this, I mean, especially with that cover,
Yeah,
you'd pick it up because you got big boobs, But then if you get into
but
it and you're
but
reading the story, you're going, what the heck, man? This thing's great.
yeah, but when everybody knows what you're getting with Corbin. I mean, it wasn't sometimes there was nudity, but it wasn't the main focus. It was always
Not
the
at all.
storytelling and
Not at
his
all. Not at
adventures.
all.
That
If
he was side by side with in heavy metal with Druna and those kind of stories where a lot more was put on the sexploits. And
Yes,
Corben,
yes,
oh, he
yes.
was always his own guy. He
Absolutely.
loved werewolves and monsters and kind of storytelling and just that great shading. Look at that lower left panel. Look at the great shading on that. And
It's
he
just
was such a he was such a student of lighting.
so here, yeah. I mean, you have a double lighting situation. Well, can't even say double lighting. Let me retract that. You have the spot
Well,
lighting,
yeah, he
but
does
he does his
the double lighting when it's color. He definitely does the
but he
double
has in the
lighting.
background this is how you make things darker by having something lighter, and this is how you make something lighter by having something darker. So that gradient in that zipatone, and then this being a flat gray zipatone just for the shadowing and the white, it's artistry, artistry.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard to find this kind of attention, and I personally make it an effort to find this attention. I don't want to do the zipatone thing. I'm tired of cutting Frisket and zipatone. So
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
I've been leaning towards the using this water soluble graphite. That's something that I'm experimenting, and that's what I want is to be able to play with shades of gradients, but the grainy quality of it. So the story is really just that this woman is, married off to this old Duke guy, and then she gets kidnapped by a werewolf, and then the old Duke guy has got to find her, but she's falling in love with the werewolf, because
Kind of
he's,
like a Beauty and the Beast
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And but it's pretty let's say gruesome
Mm-hmm.
in how this all plays out. Um, but it has like Beowulf kind of feel to it, like a twist on that. So like it
Mm-hmm.
is cataloged as a sword and sorcery kind of like story,
Mm-hmm.
but now this
Mm-hmm.
is the really sweet spot, for the story, is that she gets back to the werewolf, and then of course by having her way with
Uh-huh.
him, turns him back into the prince, and then she cuts his head off, to kill him because
Wow.
he's a werewolf. And like I said, that leads into other stories. So that's
Huh.
all this is.
Well,
And
I didn't see that
this,
coming.
yep, you didn't. But this is also another part why I love this book, is the Necromancer, another real cool like sword and sorcery, um, but just has a really kind of like would say like an awful ending, to adventurers, and they have gets feelings for each other and stuff, but she ends up becoming part of the undead by the by the
Oh, really?
sorcerer type of thing. Yeah.
Right. He
So
has had some
this is
zombie stuff. And then he ends up the last page is the glossy, so it's like the inside front cover. So no ads, and he's utilizing every page of space.
well, this
Right.
series he created this what's her name? She's like a vampirella type of gal. So she's a horror hostess, so she's got this really hot body, but then she's got this
Oh,
skull
like
face.
Elvira, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, like Elvira. I
Right.
can't see, but she's, telling you about Grim Whip #1, and the thrills and the spills, and it's all gory and everything like that. So,
Yeah. No,
but
I
yeah,
haven't.
this if you can get a hold of a copy of this is definitely a Horilla Horilla is her name. So I just find this to be once again, just like my Alfredo Akala books, having them very close. And I kind of get into a jam on going left or right and inking work. Um, stop, open this, any page, and just start. Oh wow, look, this is just all inked in. Oh, and it's just all
Yeah.
white. Oh, okay,
Right.
but you still need a balance, and he jumps down to this gray, and then it's just the simplicity. I think is just one thing that you can't get enough of, but there's obviously has to be something placed on top of that, and I really do believe he's a superior um, artist. I
He
mean, really,
he
in the
was.
term that breaks the boundaries of just being a comic book artist, I really see him as an
Right.
artist.
No, he was a sci-fi adult illustrator, and
Yeah.
the reason why I wouldn't call him a comic book artist is because a lot of his stuff did appear in magazines, and a lot of his stuff,
Mhm.
some of his best stuff were just like prints and plates and portfolio sets and stuff. But he was also the master of sequential storytelling, and he had no interest in superheroes and kitty cartoons or westerns or anything. He was into the dystopian future and the exactly the kind of stuff that heavy metal was putting out. So what a great career, and
Perfect
and
storm.
what a great art.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah, great
perfect storm.
artist and groundbreaking. And he's one of those artists where he to this day everybody's just scratching his head. How did he get all this, these tones and effects? But he's also like a real classic artist. I see that page you got there. He took his time to draw all these pine trees and all these grass needles and everything, and it's just amazing. Some artists today are we're not equipped to do that. We're too lazy, or we're just we
Too
don't
much
do
in a
the
rush.
the flora and the fauna and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff, right?
right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we're going to
mean,
be looking. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, his only kryptonite was his lettering,
Right.
and and some of his sound effect panels, but I'll take it any day. I mean, it still does the job.
Yeah.
So it's not too distracted where it's like, oh, this ruins the whole thing. It's just like, okay, that could have been hand lettered, or that computer font, could have been condensed, or whatever. But
Right.
those are just minor
Right.
criticisms.
Yeah, we're going to be looking a lot at Richard Corben because not only I think for his technique in making a comic book, but also just the way he structured and laid out and looked at things and carried you through a story and such. And there's a lot of similarities in our Turbo Pit Fighter, which it looks like you're working on uh, page. That's page what, 12? What is that?
Page
Issue
13,
page
finishing
13,
up
issue 2.
issue two, page 13. Yeah, and
Right.
so this is what we do on our regular podcast,
Yeah.
the Making of Turbo Pit Fighter. But here on our breakout podcast, we love going over the masters and going over
Yes.
the real magicians, and
Yeah, definitely.
scratching our head trying to figure out how he did it. Wow,
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to look
really,
at things
really
that
amazing.
obviously we're very passionate about, but we're also going to look into things that we are not very aware of. So, we're finding things that we might have in our collection that we never really took deeper looks at, or coming out and across stuff. As I said, I did a little journey into a comic book store and rummaged around and was looking around. I'm actually kind of excited to get to a show as soon as possible because I would like to go some box diving, and sort of just look for
Yeah,
things
I
that
was
are
I
not
was just wondering
just bring
too
like $50 in cash all
if
in
there's anything
ones,
on the calendar.
you know.
I think there's something coming up in the Bronx. I'm gonna
Yeah,
try to get to, but I have a
yeah.
I have a sick dog in the house, so I don't know how much
Okay.
time. I was just noticing, I was looking at some of his explosions too, and how interesting that is because everybody handles explosions differently. Here's some of his like interior, technical spaceship stuff,
Right.
but his his explosion, and then this came out really dark. So I think this might have been a real waste of a opportunity. Like if he would have known this was going to come out so dark, he definitely would have brought the contrast out. But look at this. What is this? I think this is definitely a misprint. There's
Yeah, there
just a
must have
big
been
black
something
circle.
there. That might be a second printing. There might have been something there that he didn't want on there for the second printing,
Well,
distribution
it just
wise.
goes over son of it. It's just right over the masthead. No, it looks like it was just a plate that printed all black. I mean, something that printed all black as a
Could
mistake.
have been just a
Here,
big old
here you see.
mistake. Hmm, it's interesting.
Yeah, this is definitely a mistake. I wonder
Hmm.
what this was for. this looks like it was parts of letters. Like this was an R or a D or a P or an R or something, because the window inside goes, but everything else, printed over black. So very weird. But um, yeah, Son of Mutant World. I guess there was a Mutant World before there was Son of
Yep,
Mutant World,
yep.
and uh, and his Great Bear character. It's just great stuff. Really great
Absolutely.
stuff.
So if you want us to take a look at some books, then leave them in the comments and we will make our do our best to make our way to those books. But every week we're doing this breakout. We're trying to keep ourselves to 30 minutes and not both of us looking at the same artist. It just happened to work that way. I know I have a stack I've been accumulating, so I've got at least like a year's worth of books to check out. But other
Yeah.
than that, that's all I have. And let these good people get back to their day and making comics, reading comics, enjoying comics.
Yeah, check back next week, or else just click the next button and binge watch the next one if you're looking at this later. We're gonna continue to make comics and review comics and ogle comics and
Obsess
and
over comics.
obsess and cavell, whatever you want to say, whatever your language is.
All right,
But
Jake.
yeah, see you guys next time.
Yep. And I'll
Be cool.
see you next week.